The Miami Heat got their long-awaited revenge against Jimmy Butler, and it's Jonathan Kuminga, now a bad roster fit with Jimmy Butler in the mix. Let's talk about it. The Miami Heat was 1-9 heading into this game, and of course, with Jimmy Butler back in town, they played like it was the NBA Finals. And it was their NBA Finals. They played the game of the year, bro. The Heat shot 17 of 25 from 3 for the game. That's 68%. Meanwhile, the Warriors shot 9 for 38 from 3. That's 24%, with the starters missing 14 straight threes to start the game, and nobody on the Warriors scored more than 15 points. That's ball game right there.
Yeah, we got to make sure that we are approaching every game like we're playing against the best team in the NBA, because that's who teams turn into when they play us. You know, they play out of their minds. This team, 17 or 25 from 3 or something like that. It's crazy. 18 for 25. It's crazy. But in saying that, it's the NBA. Everybody got talent. So, you know, whether the team with a winning record or not, everybody's got talent and can beat you on any night. We got to make sure we figure these games out.
The Miami Heat completely ignored Draymond, GP2, didn't really care about Gee or Kuminga shooting, and they played perhaps the Warriors' second best shooter, Quentin Post, off the floor by attacking him relentlessly. The Miami Heat came out with a good defensive game plan, all eyes on Jimmy, and let everyone else outside of Quentin Post and Buddy Hield shoot. In terms of Jimmy specifically, they weren't guarding him out to the three-point line, but the moment he got into the post or caught the ball on the elbow, they brought the double team. Spo put 6'9", 250-pound center Bam Adebayo on Jimmy Butler as a primary defender, essentially neutralizing any size or strength advantage Jimmy Butler might usually have. In addition to that, Bam is one of the most versatile defenders in the league. Although naturally a center, he has enough feel and lateral quickness defensively to guard wings. And with him being Jimmy's former teammate for years, I'm sure he spent a lot of time guarding him in practice. So he knows all his tendencies and all his go-to moves. When you add the secondary help behind him, it was a brilliant game plan by Eric Spoelstra. Jimmy Butler finished with 11 points, 6 rebounds, and 2 assists. He shot 5 of 12 from the field and 0 for 2 from 3. He was a minus 19. Look, I understand Coach Spoelstra coached Jimmy for 7 years, so knowing his tendencies, he came prepared with a solid defensive game plan. And with no Steph Curry, Miami was able to bring more help and allocate more defensive personnel to help on Jimmy. They were sinking in on all the Warriors' non-shooters and shrunk the court defensively. Jimmy was playing the crowd with only non-shooters to kick out to. I get all that, but I'm sorry, man. 11 points, that's just not good enough. At no point in the game did I feel like Jimmy attempted to impose his will. He was passive, and it seemed like he was emotionally checked out. He looked like he was just going through the motion. And coming off that loss against Atlanta, with no Steph in a tight playoff race, I just don't see how you can do that. The Warriors needed aggressive Jimmy, and they didn't get it. Based off Jimmy's history in Miami and how big of a chapter this was in his career, I feel like it was emotionally draining more so than he let on. Here's a quote from Jimmy Butler postgame. "It was behind me a long time ago. As soon as I ended up a Golden State Warrior, everything that went on was dead. I see it for what it is. A chapter has ended and a new one has begun. I'm very appreciative of my time here, the bonds I've built here. This was a huge part of my career. I'll continue to say I'm very grateful. I'm not spiteful toward nobody." So yeah, I just think Jimmy was ready to get this over with. Now look, I'm not copping no pleas from Jimmy Butler. The Warriors needed him and he was a no-show. Alright, let's talk about Andrew Wiggins right quick. So Wiggins struggled offensively. He only scored 10 points. Moses Moody did a great job guarding him, especially in the first quarter, where he forced Wiggins into an over and back violation and an 8-second violation. Moody was just harassing Wiggins walking the ball up. And now that Moody is essentially replacing Wiggins' role, and it's one of the main reasons the Warriors felt comfortable enough to move on from Andrew Wiggins, on top of acquiring the better player in Jimmy Butler. But anyways, you could tell both players took this matchup personal. And even though Wiggins struggled to score, he was everywhere defensively and had some of the most insane recovery blocks of the season. Now, I'm sure Andrew Wiggins is very appreciative of his time with the Warriors, but he definitely had that extra motivation to perform well and hang an L on the Warriors.
But just the general feelings, obviously facing your former team. I know you said going into it you were excited, but how did it feel just sort of actually interacting with them?
Felt good, felt good. Like, some friendly competition at the highest level. I spent a lot of years there, great organization. Loved it there. Felt good. Felt even better getting the win.
Extra motivation entering this game, just with everything around it.
For sure. I mean, you can, sense it on both sides. Obviously, when you play a former teammate or, former team, there's always the, extra little motivation.
What do you think about seeing Wiggins on the other side play?
It's crazy. We've been teammates now since 2019. 2019-20 season. And, to see him on the other side, it's weird. You see the moves that you've seen, like, year in and year out, and, like, now they're going against you. But he played well. It was good to see him have a good game for sure.
Look, I can't even front. I do miss Wiggins on his team. but I still do that trade 10 times out of 10. Alright, let's talk about Jonathan Kuminga. The Warriors are now 3-4 since Jonathan Kuminga's return. The offense with him on the court hasn't been good. So far, he hasn't been a good fit next to Jimmy like I hoped. Now with that being said, you can't blame him for this Heat loss. The starters missed 14 straight threes. The starters fell behind early. Jimmy Butler and Draymond, the two best players with Steph out, your two leaders, the two players you needed to play well in order to have a chance this game. They both no-showed. This L was not on JK. But I am acknowledging the fact that the fit hasn't been great since his return. Without Steph, that problem is amplified because you can never play Jimmy, Draymond, and Kuminga at once without Steph on the court, which is a problem because that's three of your best players. So the fact that you have to stagnate them so much due to lack of spacing, especially when Steph's not playing, that just points to less than ideal roster construction. For JK, his improvements need to come from his off-ball spacing around Jimmy, knowing how to keep the floor balanced and playing off Jimmy when he has the ball in his hands. Kuminga also needs to be a more active and intentional cutter when Jimmy has the ball in his hands. He for sure needs to cut the early shot clock threes from his shot diet, and once the defensive rebound is secured, JK needs to run a fast break like an absolute maniac, because in the open floor on a fast break, getting downhill when the defense isn't set, due to the Warriors' half-court shooting woes, that's really his best opportunity at open driving lanes getting to the rim. JK with a full head of steam getting downhill against a backpedaling defense, that's still tough to deal with. Lastly, JK needs to make his free throws. I like that he got to the line 9 times, but the problem is he went 6 for 9, that's 67%. That's just not good enough. So those are my improvements for JK. And I think it's too early to write off JK as a bad fit with this new iteration of the Warriors. Yes, the results haven't been promising thus far, but they still have 10 regular season games to figure it out. Look, the Warriors desperately need Steph back. I see Warriors fans overreacting like they're not missing their best player. A top 3 player in the league, a player that commands more defensive attention than any other superstar in the league. The offense is cooked without Steph, without a generational offensive engine, and probably the greatest offensive player in NBA history. There's just not enough spacing or offensive creation to generate good looks consistently. Look at the starting lineup, for example. You got Pods, Moody, GP2, Jimmy, and Draymond. That's your starting 5. Now, although formidable defensively, that has to be the worst starting unit in terms of spacing in the league. Look, I get it. No Steph, you gotta get jiggy with a few weird lineups, you gotta try to figure something out, try to strike lightning in the bottle, but come on, man. It's no surprise this starting lineup claimed their first 14 3-point attempts of the game. This starting lineup is a perfect example of why this team is built around Steph and his strengths, and without him, you're left with a team that has terrible roster construction that's severely lacking in shooting talent. It's not all that surprising they're dropping these games on the road. By the way, Atlanta's tanking, but they're feisty. They're a young up-and-coming team. Trae Young's an all-star caliber player, and the Warriors haven't won in Atlanta in years. And in terms of the Miami Heat, Bam's an all-star, Hero made the all-star team this season, and Wiggins at his best as an all-star. They got talent, and they desperately wanted their get back against Jimmy Butler. This was the most motivated and well-prepared they're ever going to be for a regular season game. Look, you're not about to just come into these teams' gyms and run these dudes off the court without Steph. It's not happening, bro. All these teams got talent. Now, should the Warriors still have won these games? Sure. But we all know a game play without Steph is nowhere near a guarantee. But once Steph comes back, and that's hopefully against the Pelicans, everything's going to be fine. Trust me. All right, let's take a quick look at this playoff race real quick. We got Denver at 3rd, Memphis at 4th, and Lakers at 5th. The Clippers are still creeping, and the Timberwolves are breathing down their neck as well. They're only half a game up on both of them. The Lakers have lost 3 in a row, but the Warriors haven't been able to capitalize on it. They could have very easily been within 1 game of the 5th seed. And not just that, but within 1.5 games of the 4th seeded Memphis Grizzlies. That's how tight this race is. These last few games without Steph was a missed opportunity, but the Warriors still got 10 games left to make something happen. We'll see how it goes. Anyways, that's all I got for y'all. If I entertained you or you learned something new, do me a favor. Hit the subscribe button. Also, follow me on Instagram. I'll hit you on the next one. Peace.